Welcome, future California real estate professional, to a very special, custom-tailored deep dive designed specifically for you. Today, our mission is, well, to cut through all that information overload and really pinpoint the critical concepts that will sharpen your readiness for the California real estate sales license test. We're going to laser focus on those areas where you, our dedicated listener, maybe stumbled a bit on your California real estate principles practice test. Think of this as, turning those tricky spots into absolute strengths.
That's precisely it.
Yeah.
Yeah, consider this your personalized roadmap. We're going to systematically break down core real estate principles, legal aspects, practical applications, really emphasizing the high-yield topics, the stuff that's most crucial for the actual state exam. Our goal isn't just memorization, right? It's to clarify the jargon, connect the dots between ideas, and really equip you with a solid foundational understanding, something that prepares you not just to pass, but to, confidently step into your career.
And the foundation for this deep dive comes directly from your study materials. California real estate practice, California real estate principles, and California legal aspects of real estate, all from Aceable Agent. But most importantly, we're integrating your very own California real estate principles practice test results, where you got that solid 75%. So this isn't generic. This is your custom deep dive built around your specific learning opportunities. Let's unpack this. Okay, so let's kick things off with the big players in California real estate regulation. We're talking the Department of Real Estate, the DRE, and the Real Estate Commissioner. What are their key powers, their responsibilities, and maybe what's the core reason why they even exist?
That's a great place to start, absolutely. Because understanding their role is, well, it's foundational to everything else. The DRE and the commissioner, they exist primarily for consumer protection and also to maintain the integrity of the real estate profession itself. Think of them as guardians of trust in this industry. Their powers are, yeah, pretty comprehensive. The DRE approves education providers, making sure future licensees like you get quality training. They handle licenses, applications, renewals, making sure only qualified folks can practice. A big part of their job is investigating complaints from the public. That's critical for accountability. And when needed, they take disciplinary action against licensees, formal action. Beyond that, they manage the consumer recovery account, enforce subdivision laws, fund real estate education and research, and they actively monitor mortgage broker activity. It's a lot, covering the whole ecosystem, really.
And the real estate commissioner is really at the helm then, setting the tone for all of that.
Precisely.
Right.
Yeah, the commissioner is appointed by the governor, serves as the chief executive of the DRE. Their main job: create and enforce policies focused specifically on public protection. This includes holding formal hearings for current licensees, for applicants too. And the decisions from these hearings can be pretty impactful. They can restrict a license, limit activities, suspend it temporarily, or even permanent revocation. They can also deny a new license if there are grounds. It's all about ensuring ethical, competent professionals are serving the public.
You mentioned the consumer recovery account. Can you briefly explain its purpose? Why is that such an important safety net?
Oh, absolutely. The consumer recovery account is a crucial, kind of like a last resort for consumers who've been financially harmed by a licensee. The key insight here is it provides a path to recovery, even when a licensee might not have the personal funds to pay a judgment. So if a client wins a civil suit against a licensee for something like fraud or misrepresentation, but they just can't collect the damages owed, they can apply for compensation from this account. It really reinforces public confidence, ensures there's some measure of financial recourse.
Okay, let's shift to something fundamental. When is a real estate license actually required for compensation in California? This can be a tricky area, right?
It really defines the boundaries, yeah. If you're seeking or expecting compensation in California, you need a license for a very broad range of activities. This includes, well, selling or offering to sell real estate, purchasing or offering to purchase it, seeking a prospective seller, buyer, or tenant, listing property, obviously, negotiating exchanges, leasing or renting, collecting rent, even assisting someone with, like, an application to lease or purchase state or federal land. That counts. And on the finance side, too. Seeking borrowers or lenders for loans secured by liens, negotiating those loans, collecting payments, or selling, buying, exchanging real estate sales contracts secured by liens all require a license. The underlying idea is these activities involve significant financial transactions, specialized knowledge, and, adherence to protective laws.
That sounds incredibly comprehensive. So what about the flip side? What actions are exempt? What doesn't require a license? Must be some common exceptions.
Yes, definitely. And it's important to understand the spirit of these exemptions. Generally, you don't need a license if you're acting purely on your own behalf. Selling your own house, buying for yourself. There's a limit, though. If you're doing, say, 8 or more sales contracts a year, you typically need one. Other exemptions. Acting under a power of attorney from the owner. Performing duties as a licensed attorney. Court-appointed individuals, receivers, trustees, administrators don't need one for those specific duties. Resident managers in certain housing, if their duties are limited. Like showing units, accepting pre-printed applications, collecting rent, but not negotiating terms.
Ah, okay.
Employees of corporations dealing with property owned or leased by that corporation, usually exempt, the core idea. Exemptions often apply when someone's acting in a very specific, limited, or self-interested role, or when another regulated profession is already overseeing it.
Given all these rules, what happens if a licensee falls short, violates the laws? What disciplinary actions can the DRE take?
Right, so after an investigation and a formal hearing, the DRE has a pretty significant range of actions. Reflects the severity, For applicants, they can just refuse the license. For existing licensees, they can restrict it. Means you can still operate, but maybe with limitations or closer supervision. More severe is suspension. That's a temporary loss of your ability to practice. And the toughest, revocation. Permanent removal of the license. Ends your career in California real estate, essentially. Plus, for various violations, they can issue citations and fines. Up to $2,500 per investigation. It's a tiered system, deterrence and accountability.
And two terms that often pop up with disciplinary actions are commingling and conversion. What's the key difference? Why are they considered so serious, especially for a new agent to grasp?
Oh, this is critical. Trips up many new licensees, and the consequences are severe. Commingling is simply mixing. Mixing a client's funds with your own personal funds in the same account. The core insight here. Commingling is illegal even if the client's money isn't misused or spent. It just erodes trust, blurs the lines of ownership, makes tracking funds difficult. It's the slippery slope. Conversion, though, that's when those commingled funds are actually spent on something other than their intended purpose. So mix client funds with yours, commingling, then use some for a personal bill. That's conversion.
Ah, okay, so conversion is the spending part.
Exactly. Conversion is essentially theft. Both are incredibly serious because they violate that foundational fiduciary duty of accounting, can lead straight to license revocation.
Are there any exceptions? Anytime a broker's personal funds can be in a trust account?
Yes, 2 very narrow, specific exceptions in California. Shows how strict the rules are. First, a broker can keep up to $200 of their own money in the trust account, specifically to cover bank fees and operational charges, because trust funds can't pay for those. Second, earned commissions or fees belonging to the broker can stay in the trust account for a short time, up to 25 days from deposit. Very limited allowances, really, just to avoid technical violations, not to encourage mixing.
And regarding records, how long do transaction and escrow documents need to be kept?
3 years. Under California law, all those transaction docs, escrow records, listing agreements, disclosures, offers, inspection reports must be kept meticulously for 3 years after the closing date. Ensures a clear paper trail for compliance, audits, accountability. Protects everyone involved.
Okay, advertising. Huge part of the business, but also highly regulated. What's a blind ad in California? Why is it illegal?
A blind ad is basically any ad where a licensee promotes real estate activity without clearly disclosing they're a licensed professional. It's illegal because it's deceptive, plain and simple. The public needs to know they're dealing with a licensee right from the start. Transparency is key.
And what about using fictitious business names, DBAs, or team names? What are the specific rules there?
Right, these are crucial for branding, but have strict disclosure rules. For DBAs, fictitious business names, a broker has to submit the name to the DRE for approval. No limit on how many, but the key is they can't be misleading. Can't imply a partnership if there isn't one, can't include a salesperson's name or a revoked licensee's name. And if a salesperson uses a DBA, all ads must clearly show the salesperson's name, license number, and the identity of the responsible broker. Team names are a bit different, not considered DBAs. A team name needs the surnames of at least one member, plus a term like team, group, or associates. The big restriction: team names cannot use broker or brokerage terms that might imply independence from their responsible broker. Realty or real estate are usually okay, though. And for all ads, the team must display the team name, the surname and license number of at least one member, and the responsible broker's name, always ensuring the public knows who's ultimately responsible.
What about online ads, social media, websites? What are the guidelines there?
Online is just as regulated. Licensees need to clearly disclose their name, license number, the responsible broker's license name, and MLS number if they do mortgages. For social media, license status must be apparent. The rule is honesty. All ads, even with character limits, must be truthful, not deceptive. If you control a website advertising property or services, it needs your license number displayed prominently. Beyond DRE rules, national laws apply too, like TCPA for calls, can't spam for emails. Maybe most critical today, wire fraud prevention. Implement best practices. Always verify wiring instructions directly with escrow via a known phone number, not from an email. Never send unencrypted financial data unsecured. The risk is just too high.
Now, onto a really significant area, especially in California, fair housing and discrimination. Why is this so crucial here?
Fair housing laws are fundamental, ensuring equal access, preventing discrimination. The critical insight for California: our state laws are often far more expansive than federal laws, and the stricter law always applies. The Federal Fair Housing Act protects 7 classes: religion, race, color, national origin, sex, disability, familial status. That's the national baseline. But then you have California's Fair Employment and Housing Act, VUFA. This is the stricter one you operate under here. FAFA dramatically broadens protections. It covers 15 classes total. Things like gender identity expression, genetic info, age, sexual orientation, marital status, medical condition, veteran status, way beyond the federal 7. Reflects California's deep commitment to broad anti-discrimination protections.
And the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, plays a role too, right? How does that apply to properties?
Absolutely. ADA, especially Title I, Employment, and Title III, Public Accommodations, prohibits disability discrimination and requires accessibility. For properties, it's vital to distinguish modification from accommodation. A modification is usually structural. Adding a ramp, widening a door, an accommodation is a policy change, allowing a service animal despite a no pets rule. The key: both reasonable modifications and accommodations must be made if they don't impose an undue financial or administrative burden. It's about equal access.
Let's talk specific illegal practices. Blockbusting, steering, redlining. What are they and what's their real impact?
Yeah, these are classic violations. Strictly prohibited. Blockbusting, or panic peddling, is basically encouraging homeowners to sell cheap by scaring them about protected groups moving in. Exploits prejudice for profit. Destabilizes communities. Steering is guiding clients toward or away from neighborhoods based on their protected class. Illegal even if the client asks. The agent's duty is to uphold fair housing, period.
Even if the client asks. Wow.
Even then, the responsibility is on the agent not to participate. Redlining is when lenders refuse mortgages in specific areas based on demographics, not creditworthiness. Historically, they literally drew red lines on maps. The crucial takeaway: these are illegal. And even if some narrow exemption to fair housing exists, discriminatory advertising is never legal.
So how should an agent handle it if a client expresses discriminatory preferences or asks about demographics? This feels like a really practical point.
Absolutely. Every agent needs to be ready. The direct responsibility falls on you. If a client asks about racial makeup, never answer directly. Many brokerages have a script like, our policy is not to answer those questions. You're free to research on your own. Your role is facilitation. Legal, ethical facilitation, not enabling discrimination. If you go along with discriminatory acts of speech, you're just as liable, period. Licensees are explicitly prohibited from disclosing info related to federally protected classes, non-negotiable boundary. HUD enforces federal fair housing laws. Complaints usually need filing within a year.
Okay, let's nail down some bedrock definitions. Land, real estate, real property. What's the core distinction?
Right, let's unpack these. People use them interchangeably, but there's a progression. Land is the most basic. Earth's surface, subsurface down to the center, air rights up. Raw, natural, unimproved dirt. Real estate is land plus improvements. Improvements are non-natural structures permanently affixed: buildings, fences, pools, roads. Land plus man-made additions. Real property is the most encompassing. It's the real estate, land plus improvements, plus the bundle of rights of ownership. That bundle: right to possess, use, enjoy, exclude, dispose of, sell, lease, will, encumber, mortgage. So, land is natural. Real estate is natural plus man-made. Real property is natural, man-made plus legal ownership rights.
That leads perfectly into the difference between real and personal property. This can get tricky, especially with what's included in a sale.
Critical distinction, yeah. Comes up all the time. Real property, permanently attached, conveyed by deed will, generally goes with the property to the buyer. Personal property, or chattel, movable, impermanent, conveyed by bill of sale bequest, generally goes with the seller, unless the contract says otherwise. Think about plants. Fructus naturalis, perennial props like trees, shrubs, generally real property due to permanence. Fructus industrialis emblements, annually cultivated crops like corn, wheat, typically personal property, even before harvest, because they require annual effort.
And fixtures. They seem to blur that line. How do we know if something's a fixture?
Fixtures are fascinating, exactly because they bridge that gap.
Hmm.
A fixture was personal property, but got attached so firmly it's now real property. Process is affixation or annexation. Think ceiling fans, built-in bookshelves. We use tests, often Maria. Method of attachment, adaptability, relationship of parties, intent, agreement. Intent is often key. Now, a special type. Trade fixtures or chattel fixtures. Items installed by a tenant for their business, display cases, pizza ovens, dentist chairs. Key difference. Trade fixtures usually can be removed by the tenant when they leave. If they repair damage, they remain personal property. And severance. That's the opposite, turning real property back into personal, cutting down that tree.
Let's talk about land's unique physical characteristics, three important ones.
Right? Three fundamental physical traits setting land apart. First, indestructibility. Can't be destroyed. Altered, yes, but its existence remains. Second, immobility. Can't be moved. Location is fixed, hence location, location, location. Third, non-homogeneity or uniqueness. Every parcel is unique. No two occupy the exact same space. This uniqueness and permanence are foundational to real estate law and value. A related concept is accession, right, to use what's on your land, like natural additions from accretion.
Now onto a tricky area, and one you wanted to understand better from your practice test. Co-ownership. Differences in how property can be owned by multiple people.
Yes, ownership forms, especially co-ownership, are critical and often tested. Three basic forms: ownership in severalty, sole ownership; co-ownership, shared concurrent; and trusts. Third party holds title for beneficiaries.
Specifically, what distinguishes tenancy in common from joint tenancy, especially regarding unequal portions and what happens at death? This was a point you missed.
Classic exam question, vital distinction. Tenancy in common, co-ownership. Each has an undivided interest. Defining feature and what trips people up. Owners can hold unequal portions, 60-40 maybe, still possess the whole property. Importantly includes rights of inheritance. No right of survivorship. If one owner dies, their share goes to their heirs via will or law, not the surviving co-owners. Only needs unity of possession. Joint tenancy, contrastingly, is much stricter. Needs all four unities, PATT. Possession, equal right to possess all of it. Interest, co-owners must always hold equal shares. Key difference, if one has 50%, all others must have 50%. Time, acquired interest at the same time. Title, acquired interest of the same legal document. Deed, most significant feature, right of survivorship. If one joint tenant dies, their interest automatically passes to the surviving joint tenants, bypassing heirs and wills. Often used by unmarried couples, business partners. No, in California, not typically the default for married couples. They have something else.
Which brings us to California being a community property state. What does that mean for married couples, registered domestic partners? And what about quasi-community property, another area from your test?
Critical California-specific concept, yes. Community property. Property acquired during marriage is owned equally, 50-50, by both spouses. Applies to married couples and registered domestic partners here. Core insight. Community property can't be sold or encumbered without both signatures. Reflects equal ownership. Property earned before marriage or acquired during by gift inheritance, usually separate property. Now, quasi-community property, more nuanced, usually relevant when a couple moves to California. Refers to property, wherever it is, that would have been community property if the acquiring spouse lived in California when they got it. Example, Paul and Raul marry, live in Massachusetts, buy a home there. Later move to CA, then divorce. If that MA home was bought during marriage, CA courts treat it as quasi-community property. Each gets half interest in the divorce. Allows CA divorce courts to apply community property principles to certain assets acquired outside the state. Ensures equitable division.
Briefly, how do different business structures hold property?
Okay, quick rundown. Structure impacts liability, taxes. Sole proprietorship. One person owns it. Personally liable for all business debts. Property usually in individual's name. Partnerships. 2 or more people. Property held various ways. Tenants in partnership, tenants in common, joint tenants. General partners have unlimited liability. Limited partners are passive, limited liability. LLCs, limited liability companies, popular. Offer limited liability to members, like corporations, but often pass through taxation, avoids double tax. Flexible, corporations, separate legal entities. Shareholders have limited liability, more complex tax reporting. Trusts. Creator, trustor, puts assets with manager, trustee for a beneficiary. Controls assets after death.
Let's discuss eminent domain, a concept from your practice test. How does it connect to agency termination? This scenario tripped you up.
Okay, let's unpack this using Pete for government powers. Police power. Regulate land use for public good. Zoning, building codes, environmental regs. Eminent domain. Government power to seize private property for public use, even if owner refuses. The process is condemnation. Taxation. Right to levy property taxes ad valorem for public services. A sheet. State takes property when owner dies with no will and no heirs. Now, connecting eminent domain to agency termination from your test question. Condemnation of the property via eminent domain results in agency termination by operation of law. This is crucial. Remember Joey's scenario. Home condemned or destroyed by flood. Agency agreement terminates automatically. Why? Once the government legally seizes it or it's destroyed, the purpose of the agency, sell by manage that specific private property, can no longer be fulfilled by private parties. Ownership control changed legally. It's an automatic legal consequence, not something the parties decide.
Another question you had related to intestate succession. What happens when someone dies intestate, often confused with a sheet?
Very common confusion, yeah. Intestate means dying without a valid will. Testate is with a valid will. Your practice test question about Quinn highlighted this. When someone dies intestate, their property does not necessarily escheat to the state. No, it gets distributed among their heirs according to state succession laws. These laws dictate who inherits when there's no will. A sheet state takes property happens only when owner dies with no will, AD no legal heirs. So if Quinn had heirs, property goes to them, not the state. Key distinction. And while we're on property passing, and just scenario from your test, lien priority, specifically tax and being senior. Generally, liens follow first in time, first in line. Earliest recorded gets priority. Big exception. Ad valorem taxes, property taxes, and special assessments always take priority over any other liens, regardless of recording date. So Jenna's federal tax lien, most likely senior, takes priority over her mortgage. The judgment lien, even if they were recorded first, ensures local governments get funds for public services. Vital.
Let's touch briefly on planning and zoning, key aspects of police power.
Crucial for orderly development. Planning commissions create master plans for municipalities' long-term vision. Plans inform zoning ordinances, local laws regulating land use, residential, commercial, industrial districts. Disputes. Board of Zoning Adjustment, BZA, steps in. They hear appeals, interpret ordinances, approve and deny variances. A variance is an exception if strict compliance causes undue hardship due to unique property traits, size, shape, topography. Yeah. Lastly, California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, vital state law. Requires evaluating environmental effects before building permits, integrates environmental concerns.
You wanted clarity on deed restrictions. How are they connected to a property? How do they affect future owners? This was a direct question from you.
Right. Another point causing confusion. Deed restrictions are public controls, often by developers, maintaining subdivision standards. Critical insight, what you wanted to clarify. Deed restrictions run with the land, meaning they stay with the property until legally dissolved or they expire. They don't vanish on sale. New buyer takes property subject to existing restrictions. They must be explicitly removed or expire per their terms, can cover fence heights, building materials, etc.
Let's differentiate easements, especially easement by condemnation, from similar concepts like adverse possession, another specific concept you asked about.
Okay, an easement is just a right to use another's land for a specific purpose without owning it. Non-possessory interest. An easement by condemnation, from your question, is created when private property is taken for public use via eminent domain. So, government isn't taking all the property, just a specific right to use part of it. Utility line, maybe? Public path. Connects back to eminent domain power. Important to distinguish from a prescriptive easement. Arises from using another's property continuously, openly, hostilely, without permission, notoriously for a set time, usually 5 years in CA. Grants use of the property. Similar, but distinct from adverse possession. Similar elements: hostile, actual, open, continuous, notorious use, but critically in CA, also needs claimant to pay property taxes for 5 consecutive years. If met, adverse possession grants ownership, not just use. Core insight. Prescriptive easement is use. Adverse possession is ownership, plus taxes in CA.
Okay, this was a core concept you missed. The fundamental difference between a client and a customer. Let's clarify that, because it dictates everything an agent does.
Absolutely fundamental. Defines your relationship with parties in a transaction. A client, someone you and your broker have a formal agency relationship with. You owe them the highest trust fiduciary duties, legally bound to represent their best interests above all others, including your own. A customer, someone you don't have an agency relationship with. You still owe them honesty, fair dealing, disclosure of material facts, but not fiduciary duties. You work with a customer, but for a client. Paramount distinction. Misunderstanding leads to legal trouble.
What are those highest levels of trust, those fiduciary duties? Let's use old Issacar to remember them.
Old DCAR, great mnemonic. Bedrock of the agent-client relationship. Obedience. Obey lawful client instructions. Client decides. Agent acts legally. Loyalty. Act in client's absolute best interest, above your own, above anyone else's. Undivided allegiance. Disclosure. Disclose all material facts to the principal affecting their decision. Informed choices. Confidentiality. Keep clients' private info private. Critical insight. Duty lasts forever, even after representation ends. Never reveal past client confidences. Accounting. Properly handle all funds property. Meticulous records. No commingling, no conversion. Reasonable care diligence. Act with skill and care of a competent professional. Perform competently. Protect client from foreseeable harm.
You got a question about single agents. What's their defining trait? How does that compare to other agency types in California?
Okay, let's look at the three approved relationships here. Single agency is the clearest. First, single agency or exclusive agency. Agent represents only one party, seller or buyer in one deal. Never both sides of the same transaction. Avoids conflict of interest. Provides highest level of undivided loyalty. Remember, the broker sets the brokerage's agency policy. If a goods brokerage doesn't do dual agency, she can't, even if the state allows it. Second, dual agency. Same brokerage represents both buyer and seller in one transaction. Legal in CA, but very strict rules. Needs explicit written disclosure and consent from both. Why? Because both parties give up full disclosure and undivided loyalty from the agent to them. Agent must be neutral, balanced, delicate. Third, sub-agency. Agent enlists other agents to help a client, like a buyer's agent acting as a sub-agent to the listing agent. The sub-agent effectively owes fiduciary duties to the listing agent's principal, usually the seller.
Let's discuss something critical but overlooked: gratuitous agency. Why tell your sponsoring broker about it, even if you're not getting paid? Another area you needed to clarify.
Extremely important, yeah. Often missed, potentially big consequences. Gratuitous agency. Agency created with no expectation of payment. Like helping a friend sell as a favor, no fee. Critical insight. Even with no money exchange, gratuitous agency puts responsibility and potential liability on your sponsoring broker, known as vicarious liability. Brokers are responsible for your actions, even free ones. Not telling your broker means they're unaware of potential liabilities. A good office policy manual helps mitigate this risk, setting guidelines for all agency types. Worth mentioning, property managers often act as a landlord's general agent, work under a management agreement, aim to maximize owner's return, find tenants, collect rent, maintain property.
Key concept for the exam. First, substantive contact.
Yeah.
What is it? When is agency disclosure required? This is a practice test question for you.
First, substantive contact, crucial trigger point for disclosure. Generally, the first face-to-face meeting with a customer before sharing confidential info about a specific property or acting for them on one. Remember May's scenario from your test. Her first meeting with a potential agent, that's first substantive contact. Core insight. This is the moment to clarify who you represent, or if you're just gathering info. Ensures customer understands the relationship, avoids misassumptions. Timing is vital in CA. Disclose as soon as practicable before providing real estate services. California Association of Realtors has forms. Form AD, disclosure regarding real estate agency relationship. Used with unrepresented parties before agency forms, explains relationship types. Then Form AC, confirmation of real estate agency relationships, confirms the chosen agency relationship once decided, ensures transparency, informed consent.
Finally, agency termination. Your question about Joey and Peter highlighted different ways. What's the difference between termination by operation of law versus acts of the parties?
Important distinction, yes. Your practice test examples illustrate it well. Two main ways agency ends. First, operation of law. Terminated by legal application automatically regardless of parties' wishes. Crucial distinction. Examples. Performance. Purpose fulfilled. Deal closes. Expiration. Agreement term ends. Destruction or condemnation of property. Joey's situation. Property destroyed, flood, fire, or taken by eminent domain. Agency ends automatically. Subject matter gone or unavailable. Death, incapacity or bankruptcy of principal or broker usually terminates agency automatically. Loss of broker's license terminates all agency agreements under that broker. Second, acts of the parties. Termination due to actions and intentions of at least one party in the contract. Examples. Mutual agreement rescission. Both agree to end early. Peter's situation if they mutually agreed. Revocation. Principal, client unilaterally terminates. Buyer Belinda firing your agent for not listing. Clear revocation by active parties. Client can revoke, but might owe fees per contract. Renunciation. Agent unilaterally terminates. Breach of agreement. Party fails obligations without cause can lead to legal remedies. Crucially, when a principal wants to end agency, agent must comply immediately. Stop marketing. Remove signs. Termination should always be in writing if possible. Avoids disputes.
Okay, shifting to contracts. Foundational stuff. What makes a contract legally binding in California? The essential ingredients.
Right. 5 essential elements. Miss 1. Contract could be void or unenforceable. First, mutual assent. Meeting of the minds. Offer and acceptance. Clear, agreed upon exchange of promises. Second, consideration. Something valuable exchanged by each party. Doesn't have to be money. Promise, act, service, forbearance, the what for. Third, legally competent parties. Age of majority 18 and CA, not mentally incompetent, understand actions. Fourth, reality of consent. Entered freely with needed info. No fraud, duress, undue influence, mistake negating true consent. Fifth, lawful objective. Purpose can't be illegal. Contract for illegal acts. Void from the start.
How are contracts classified? And what are the possible responses to an offer?
Contracts can be classified several ways. Implied by actions or express by words, written, oral. Bilateral, both promise obligated, like a listing agreement. Or unilateral, one promises, other performs if they choose, like an open listing. Also executed, all done, or executory, ongoing obligations. Responses to an offer. Offer can accept, unconditionally mirrors offer, counter, reject, or ignore. Absolutely crucial. A counteroffer legally rejects the original offer and presents a new offer. Original offer is dead unless revived. Phrase, time is of the essence, means deadlines are firm. Miss one. Breach. California also has a system for multiple counteroffers, CRR form SMCO. Seller responds to multiple buyers accept. Seller then chooses one accepted offer to proceed with, re-signs it. Then it's binding.
What can an agent actually do preparing contracts in CA without crossing into unauthorized practice of law? Huge point for new licensees.
Yeah. Really important, yeah. Easy place to get into trouble. Core insight. Agents can fill in prepared contracts, standardized forms, like CIR forms, pre-approved by attorneys. But agents must be super careful not to draft their own contracts from scratch or significantly alter pre-printed language. That is unauthorized practice of law. Illegal. Agents can explain what clauses mean, but absolutely cannot give legal advice. The line, here's what this means, versus here's what you should do. Advising what to do legally, that's for an attorney. Modifying contracts, usually use an addendum, adds info to completed contract, or amendment, changes already agreed upon contract. Both need dating, signing, and initialing by all parties.
How are contracts terminated or discharged? Common ways they end.
Two main categories, like agency termination. First, operation of law. Terminated by legal obligation automatically. Examples: destruction of subject property, bankruptcy of a party, force majeure event, act of God, disaster, if contract allows, lack of essential legal element from start, void. Statute of limitations expires. Contract deemed unconscionable, oppressive. Death incapacity can terminate, though exceptions exist. Second, acts of the parties. Termination by actions of parties involved. Examples: mutual agreement rescission. Both agree to end, return to start. Novation. Parties agree to replace existing contract with a new one. Accord and satisfaction. Agree to discharge original for a new one with different, usually lesser performance that satisfies the debt. Subsequent modifying agreement. New agreement changes original terms. Revocation. Party withdraws offer agreement before acceptance performance. Renunciation. Party formally abandons rights, duties. Assignment. Original party transfers interest to new party. Original often still secondarily liable. Breach. Party fails obligations without cause. Material breach can lead to remedies like damages.
In California, what form is common for residential purchase contracts and its absolute essential elements for enforceability? This is the backbone form.
Most common, widely used, residential purchase agreement and joint escrow instructions, RPA, from CIR. Super versatile. Acts as the initial offer from buyer. Once seller accepts, it becomes a legally binding contract. Dual purpose. Essential elements for enforceability. CA Supreme Court case clarified just a few are truly needed. 1. Identities of seller and buyer, full legal names. 2. Identity of the property, unique legal description. 3. Purchase price, agreed monetary value. 4. Time and manner of payment, how, when paid, cash, loan, timelines. Those are legal minimums. But typical RPAs include much more. Crucial for smooth transaction, protection, things like closing date, possession transfer date, specific finance terms, material facts. Earnest money, customary not required for validity, cost allocation, HOA fees, etc. Statutory disclosures, lead paint, buyer's investigation, due diligence period, as is clause. Important. As is means buyer accepts visible condition, but seller still must disclose all known material facts. Can't hide no defects. Time is of the essence is also common. Deadlines matter.
Moving into finance. You wanted to understand borrower approval steps, starting with pre-qualification versus pre-approval. Harold's scenario from your test.
Really important distinction, yeah. For borrowers and agents guiding them. Pre-qualification. First, most informal step. Like Harold experienced, lender takes borrower at their word, income, debts, etc. Based on that self-reported info, lender gives a general estimate of loan amount borrower could probably get. Quick, informal ballpark figure. Useful for initial budgeting, not a commitment. Pre-approval, much more solid. Lender actually reviews borrower's financials. Needs documentation. Pay stubs, W-2s, bank statements, credit check. If approved, lender issues pre-approval letter. more concrete indication of ability to get financing for a specific amount, subject to appraisal. Carries much more weight with sellers. Shows buyer is serious, financially capable, after offer acceptance. Moves to underwriting. Final, most rigorous analysis. Borrower's creditworthiness and the property collateral. Underwriters check the 5 C's of credit. Capacity, income, ability to pay. Credit, history score, capital assets, collateral property, conditions, loan purpose economy. Higher FICO, usually better terms.
Let's clarify qualifying ratios. You asked what they're collectively known as, critical for assessing risk.
Right, another point you wanted clarity on. Fundamental to how lenders assess ability to pay. Underwriters use 2 main formulas, collectively qualifying ratios, to see if applicant can handle monthly payments plus other debts. First, payment to income ratio, housing ratio, compares monthly house payment, PITI, principal, interest, taxes, insurance, to gross monthly income. Example, Jeremy from your test. $2K monthly income, 25% ratio. Max monthly PITI is $500. $2K by overall is 2 5s. Second, debt to income ratio, total debt ratio. Compares total monthly debt, house payment plus credit cards, car loans, student loans, to gross monthly income. Typical conventional loan ratios. Maybe max 28% IPI, 36% DTI. FHA loans, often more flexible, maybe 31% ITI, 43% DTI. Crucial for assessing financial capacity, loan risk.
You had a question on calculating interest for an interest-only loan. Let's break down loan types and how interest gets calculated.
Understanding amortization is key. How payments are applied. Amortized loans. Most common residential type. Each payment includes principal interest. Principal balance decreases over time. Interest paid in arrears. Pay end of month for interest accrued that month. As principal drops, interest portion drops too. More goes to principal. Partially amortized loans. Equal payments, but not enough to fully pay off by term end. Larger lump sum balloon payment due at the end for remaining balance. Interest-only loans. Straight-term loans. Hannah's scenario from your test. Periodic payments cover only interest accrued. No principal paid down during term. Entire principal amount due as a single large balloon payment at loan end. Calculating monthly interest for non-amortized loans, like Hannah's interest only. Simple formula, principal x interest rate, A12. Hannah's $140 B loan, 4.9% rate. Annual interest equals $140K by 0.049 cents equals $6,860. Monthly $6,860, according to 1212, assessors $571.67. That's her consistent monthly payment until the $140K principal is due. Mortgage factor charts, handy shortcut, estimate monthly P plus I per $1K loan amount. Endpoints, fees paid at closing. Origination points, lender's cost. Discount points, buy down interest rate. 1 point equals 1% of loan principal.
Let's discuss those important loan forms you asked about. Loan estimate and closing disclosure. Purpose, timing, how they benefit consumers.
Foundational forms, yeah. Mandated by trade rule. TILRESPA integrated disclosure. Introduced for simplification and transparency. Easier for consumers to understand, compare. Lenders can't charge for preparing them. Loan estimate. Preliminary estimate of loan terms. Costs. Lender must deliver mail by 3rd business day after getting loan application. Core insight. Lets you easily compare offers from different lenders early on. Promotes competition. Informed decisions. Includes cash to close estimate. Closing disclosure. Companion document. Provides final, comprehensive details. Lender must ensure consumer gets in no later than 3 business days before consummation. Closing. That 3-day rule is critical. Gives you time to review all final figures, itemized fees, everything before committing. Also has definitive cash to close section. Shows exact amount needed. Both forms empower consumers with clear info.
You wanted to clarify the difference between title and deed. A practice test question for you, and it trips people up.
Trips up many, yeah. But straightforward conceptually. Title. The abstract concept of ownership, not a physical document. It's the legal right to possess, use, dispose that bundle of rights. Proof of ownership legally, a theory, deed. The physical legal document that formally transfers title from grantor to grantee. Its purpose. Officially, record ownership changes. So deed is the physical instrument signed delivered. Title is the underlying ownership right conveyed by the deed, recording the deed. Crucial, creates public record of ownership constructive notice. Everyone legally presumed to know. Protects lender's interests too. Establishes lien and priority.
You also asked about quitclaim deeds, especially for clearing title, another practice test question.
Right. A quitclaim deed conveys any interest the grantor has when signing, but makes no guarantees about title validity or if grantor even has interest. Core insight. Often used not for strong ownership transfer, but to quickly clear clouds on the title. Clouds, minor defects, potential claims making title unclear, unprobated wills, messy divorces, potential distant heir claims. Person signs quitclaim, officially gives up any potential claim, valid or not, removes that cloud, makes title cleaner. Tool for ambiguity, not primary sales. Verifying clear title involves title search. Examining public records for rights defects to protect against unforeseen issues. Title insurance typically bought. Owner's policy protects buyer. Lender's policy, often mandatory, protects lender.
Let's talk closing costs, specifically proration, concept you needed clarification on from the test. Impacts how expenses are divided.
Proration, key part of closing costs. Fairly dividing allocating expenses, taxes, HOA fees, between buyer-seller based on actual usage period. Ensures fairness. Each pays for the portion they actually used benefited from during their ownership time, if taxes HOA paid in advance or arrears. Proration ensures seller pays for their days, buyer pays for theirs, right up to closing day. Typical closing costs. Buyers usually pay appraisal, attorney fees if used, points, recording fees, initial tax insurance reserves for escrow. Sellers typically cover broker commission, paying off existing liens, their mortgage, documentary transfer tax, CA, $0.55 per $500 value. Usually seller pays, but negotiable. Proration accounts for these precisely.
Another area you asked for detail on, appraisal versus CMA, specific practice test question. Let's nail the fundamental difference.
Fundamental distinction, yeah. For exam and practice, appraisal, official impartial opinion of value. Specific property, specific date, done by a licensed appraiser. Regulated process, uses market info, valuation approaches, typically required by lenders, ensures property value supports loan, protects their investment. Core insight. Appraisal is highly reliable, impartial, legally defensible valuation, primarily for lending legal purposes. Comparative market analysis, CMA. Contrastingly, a report by a real estate agent compares recent sales, active listings, expireds, comps to estimate likely market value. Valuable tool for agents. Helps clients set listing price, determine offer, but not an appraisal. Key difference from your test. Appraisal is more detailed, reliable, legally binding due to licensure methodology. CMA is more informal, less regulated. Agents informed estimate for marketing pricing. Appraisers use three main approaches depending on property. One, sales comparison approach, most common for residential. Compares subject to recent sales of similar properties, comps. Adjusts for differences, features, age, condition, market. Two, cost approach. Estimates value by calculating cost to build new, reproduction or replacement costs. Subtracting depreciation, wear, tear, obsolescence, adding land value. Useful for new construction, unique properties, museums. Land doesn't depreciate. Economic life, how long improvement adds value. 3. Income capitalization approach. Appraises based on income potential. Converts net operating income, NOI, into value via capitalization rate, NOI, cap rate equals value. Used for commercial investment properties where income is key. Concepts like gross rent multiplier, GRM, gross income multiplier, GMBOIDs are related simplified methods. Hashtag outro.
Wow, okay. What a deep dive. We covered a tremendous amount of ground today, all designed specifically around your California real estate principles practice test results. We hit the regulatory landscape, DRE, commissioner roles, licensing, those tricky points like commingling versus conversion, and really highlighted fair housing, especially California's broader FECA protections and your direct responsibilities as an agent.
That's right. And we clarified those bedrock distinctions, real versus personal property, land's unique traits. Really delves into co-ownership, differentiating tenancy and common and joint tenancy, untangling community and quasi-community property in CA. Connected government powers like eminent domain to real-world impacts, like agency termination by operation of law. Clarified intestate succession versus escheat.
Then we pulled apart agency relationships, client versus customer critical, detailed those fiduciary duties using old EC-CAR. Covered single and dual agency, the importance of gratuitous agency awareness for your broker, and that vital timing of first substantive contact for disclosures. Broke down agency termination 2, operation of law versus acts of the parties, using your test scenarios.
And finally, contracts. The 5 essential elements offer acceptance dynamics, what licensees can and cannot do in preparation. Wrapped up with key finance and valuation, the lending process from pre-qual to the loan estimate and closing disclosure. Title versus deed, quitclaim deeds, closing cost prorations, and homed in on appraisal versus CMA, plus the 3 valuation approaches.
You've just processed a really comprehensive, highly targeted review, focused on critical concepts for the test, especially reinforcing those areas where you needed it most. By focusing on these specific opportunities and understanding how these principles connect, you've absolutely taken a significant step toward exam success.
Yeah, remember, success isn't just memorizing facts. It's recalling definitions, sure, but being able to apply concepts to real-world scenarios. As you keep preparing, think not just what the rule is, but how it protects consumers, shapes deals, defines ethical practice, every transaction.
You've got this. What stands out to you now as the most crucial takeaway for your future practice? Keep practicing, keep reviewing the why, keep that curiosity going. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and we look forward to your continued learning journey.